Let's bring back the front bench to talk about this. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. We have two Atlantic Canadians on this panel, neither of whom is actually in Atlantic Canada, but we can get some good insight. Brian, I'll start with you. Like Andrew, I didn't even hear that Andrew Furey comment until the show was on the air because it came in so late. Every second hand I shake, I'm saying, no, I don't work for the Prime Minister. Like, that is a pretty bonanza statement to make. It's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I again, don't think we should be surprised. We certainly have covered on this panel a few times some of the things that Premier Furey had to say with regards to the Prime Minister's policies and the Trudeau government's approach on a few things. So certainly no surprise that he would voice his concern. And look, I mean, given the polling, given the segment you had with the pollsters, I don't think there's much of a surprise to hear that there's a bit of an issue in Atlantic Canada. I find myself in Montreal right now, but certainly live in Atlantic Canada, and I can tell you that you certainly feel it, and you see it in the polls. So I don't think there's anything to hide there. It's pretty evident. So with that said, I mean, if you can't get your Liberal candidate provincially to support the federals, the federal Liberals, then you're certainly in a tough situation. That said, I don't think this is a surprise. I wouldn't believe that anybody in Ottawa should be shocked by this because they see the polling. It doesn't mean that it's insurmountable, but every week there seems to be some type of indication that things are still not picking up for the federal Liberals. So at the very least, they got to be fine-tuning their strategy and their way to try to get off the mat here for the upcoming election in the next year or so. And that'll come quick. So with things like this and sentiment like the sentiment that seems to be sort of cemented in, certainly there's a lot to do for them to be able to try to pick things up.
Yeah, and I take that point. I guess, and I'm not certainly saying it's surprising, but you point to the polls, like Liberals here tell me the polls, don't put too much stock in the polls. Don't put too much stock in the polls. Like, this is a premier, Lisa, of a province reflecting his experience at the door, which is often not always congruous with the polls, but when it is, says something as well.
Yeah, so here's my takeaway from this. I think you have to consider whether or not we're in a situation that people are so tired of Trudeau that if you put somebody else in its place, it's going to make things better. And I think we can fairly make a case right now that that is not the way that people are thinking about it. I think that we've moved from, if you get rid of Trudeau, we'll vote for you again, or if you distance yourself from Trudeau, we'll vote for you because you're different, to Trudeau has messed up what I have here in this province, and as a result, I'm not going to give my vote to the Liberals, and I'm going to vote for change. I'm going to vote for somebody else. And that's a dangerous place, because maybe we've moved over from that notion that if you just fix the leadership of the Liberal Party, you're going to fix their problem. And looking at that vote, I'm beginning to think that you may not be able to explain your way out and say that the other guy is gone, therefore vote for me, because clearly the Premier tried to do that and 80% of the people said, we're not buying it.
Do you think that's true, Tom? Because the other bonanza thing was your column this week on Mark Carney waiting in the wings. It did really well on CTV's website.
Well, I do think that somebody of the caliber of Carney, with what he would bring to the game economically, because that's the key thing here. Everything else you can talk about Trudeau, you can say that he did really well during the pandemic and he renegotiated the free trade agreement with the Americans, but everything comes down to the economy right now, Vassy, and that's what people are looking at. They know that they can't afford groceries, things have gotten sky high, the inflation is really clobbering them, they don't have enough, the paycheck doesn't go far enough. Poilievre has hit into that. He's identified housing as a key issue. He's brought along a lot of young voters. And who would have thought that the Conservatives would have been able to draw in that many, people from Gen X and from the millennials? He's bringing in so many people right now because he's got a discourse that connects with them. So I think that it is actually about Mr. Trudeau at this stage. Is the Liberal brand dead? Could it be resuscitated? Or is Lisa right that it doesn't matter if you changed drivers, this thing ain't going anywhere? I do think that if they had somebody who could answer on the economy, who didn't have the weight of their Trudeau years on their shoulders. Look, Chrystia Freeland is a really good cabinet minister. She's a skilled person, but she's got the full weight of the Trudeau years on her shoulders. So how could she or Dominic LeBlanc or name any of the other good people around the cabinet table, they're stuck with that. Carney comes in, blank sheet, tremendous credentials, ability to talk to people, bilingual, governor of Canada's bank, of course, the Bank of Canada, but governor of the Bank of England, knows people all around the world. Could he present himself as somebody who could set the Canadian economy straight? Or has the jello set on that, as Lisa is inferring, that it's too late? You can't get past it, and the Liberals don't have a chance. I think that Carney does have a chance. Somebody like him, but you'd have to have a person who could answer that key question: what are you going to do for my life in this current economy? And I think that Trudeau can't answer any of that anymore. Carney might have an answer for the Liberals. Would it be enough to change the track of the juggernaut that is Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives? Perhaps.
If I hear everyone right, it kind of boils down, jumping off the outcome of this in by-election, Rob, to is the problem Trudeau or is the problem the Liberal brand?
I mean, I think everyone's right. It's a bit of both. We saw that in the by-election in Milton, the provincial by-election. The provincial Liberals found that the Trudeau kind of anchor around them was a bit of an anvil. The by-election that I'm going to be watching, though, is June 24th in Toronto, St. Paul's. That's one of the safest Liberal seats in Ontario. That when they only won 11 seats in 2011, they won Carolyn Bennett's seat. If somehow the Tories steal that seat away from them, then I think the crescendo of Liberals saying that the Prime Minister has to move on will really grow.
I think that's such a good observation, especially with the timing heading into the summer, the prospect of a leadership race and the results of that. We have a few more minutes left, and I did want to get everyone's take as we stand by for this vote that's going to take place in the House of Commons. We convened last week when this first broke to talk about the future of Greg Fergus. Brian, the Conservatives have put forward a motion that will be voted on, as I said, shortly, on whether or not he should be removed from that position. It seems like that won't go ahead, given the NDP's support for the government. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it looks like it won't go ahead. It's a way in which the Conservatives can certainly sort of get into the cycle with a bit of a negative for the Liberals. I hope that the only outcome that we're going to see from this, given that we know where the vote's going to go, it looks like, is that the Speaker, his office, and the people around him get the message and make no mistakes like this ever again.
Lisa, what's your take?
Speaker Fergus is the greatest gift that the Conservatives could have right now, and they certainly don't want to win the vote tonight because they want to keep that around and just keep that rolling all the time. They don't want a Conservative Speaker. They definitely want to have a Liberal Speaker there who is prone to have gaffes and make mistakes, and it's only a matter of time. We're on number 4 now.
Tom?
I think that Greg Fergus is a fine person. He's also a very partisan Liberal, and that has not changed. He's just not been able to move away from that. I'm not surprised to see the NDP voting to keep Greg Fergus there, because, of course, Fergus will help the Liberals go against Pierre Poilievre, and that'll, by implication, they're hoping, help the NDP. I think it's a mistake. I think they should be thinking a bit more about the institution, and I think that depreciating the institutions of our democracy right now is the last thing we need. Greg Fergus, unfortunately, can't help build them up.
I will say, last word to you, Rob, according to the NDP, and Peter Julian was on the show, it is the value they place on the institution informing the decision to support Greg Fergus. In their view, they said that, that it was the Liberal Party that made this decision and apologized. They don't feel the events stack up to be too partisan in the way that the Conservatives feel, obviously, and the Bloc, I should say, very differently. Yeah,
I thought Julian did a better job of defending Fergus than the Liberals did, frankly. My only thing, I mean, look, they're going to win the vote. He'll survive, presumably. And I think the Tories have won their political point, but they risk looking obsessive, and this is a very Planet Ottawa thing. I know the institution is important. I know we all care about the referee, and he's not particularly a good speaker, clearly. He's gaffe-prone, but the Tories need to, this doesn't create any jobs anywhere in Ontario or in the rest of Canada. I think they need to look a little less fixated on procedural things like this. They've won their political point. It starts to look almost a bit cheesy at a certain point.
I mean, Planet Ottawa, nothing's wrong with that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our front bench. Appreciate the discussion. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.